Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Thursday night, and this is Farage at Large, live from Peterborough. Please welcome your host, Nigel Farage.
Good evening, we're in Peterborough. We've got the local MP, Paul Bristow, who was kicked out of the House of Commons yesterday. A wildly enthusiastic audience, but so much to discuss. Population pressures in this city on housing, on health, on schools are very real. We're going to have a big, open debate with our audience, but before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Thank you, Nigel. Good evening. The top story is that a man has been arrested after a car crashed into the gates of Downing Street this afternoon. Armed officers arrested the man on suspicion of criminal damage and dangerous driving. The incident is not being treated as terror-related. Well, footage obtained by GB News shows officers dragging the suspect out of the car and then handcuffing him face down on the ground. The area was immediately cordoned off, but Whitehall has now been reopened. There are no reports of any injuries, and we understand an eyewitness gave his account of what happened to our reporter on the scene.
Police were very quick to respond. Children ran away panicking. We ran over in excitement almost with the cameras. It wasn't long before the police had him out of the vehicle, face down. We were pointing tasers at him. Maybe 3 minutes, there was like 10, 12 police vehicles, and it just seemed almost like emotionless. And then like they escorted him about 10 yards that way, and I got a video of him going across. He was white, grey straggly hair.
Well, in other news today, Number 10 has refused calls for Rishi Sunak to apologise, despite failing to reduce net migration, which has now risen to record levels. ONS data released today shows migration numbers rose to 606,000 last year, even after repeated government pledges to bring overall numbers down. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick says the government will keep its promise.
Net migration is far too high. This is placing intolerable pressure on public services, on housing supply, and our ability to integrate people. We've made a very significant intervention this week, which will make a tangible difference, reducing the number of student dependents that come to our universities, because universities should be in the education business, not the immigration business.
Rishi Sunak has welcomed the reduction in the energy price cap, describing it as a major milestone towards his goal of halving inflation. Ofgem has announced the typical annual household energy bill will fall to a maximum of £2,074 a year from July. That's a drop of £426. Ofgem says the first price drop in 18 months reflects recent falls in wholesale energy prices. Now, 9 people have been arrested over the disorder in Cardiff that followed the deaths of 2 teenagers on Monday evening. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans were killed in the Ely area of the city while they were riding an e-bike. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged showing a police van following the teens just before their deaths. 15 officers were injured and cars were set alight in the night of violence that followed. All 9 people remain in custody on suspicion of rioting. And finally, police in Portugal have confirmed the searches near a reservoir in relation to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann have officially concluded now. Portuguese, German and British police officers have been investigating in a remote area near the Algarve coastal resort where Madeleine first went missing 16 years ago. A source close to the investigation says there is nothing to report after 3 days of intense searches. The authorities are now sending any materials found at the site for testing. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel, and it's Good Evening Peterborough.
Well, we're here tonight live in Peterborough. Now, in political terms, Peterborough is fascinating. Go back to about 1970 and you'll see it's Labour, Tory, Labour, Tory, Labour, Tory. And that's been the case for the last few elections too. It is currently held by Paul Bristow, a Conservative Member of Parliament. But it's one of those seats, whichever way Peterborough goes, it's likely that's the way the country will go too. And I have to tell you, when we chose this date of May the 25th, we had absolutely no idea that the government migration figures for last year were going to be out. But they do say in life that you make your own luck. This city is growing more quickly than any other in the country. And so when it comes to population pressure, pressure on housing, pressure on health, pressure on school places, I think people in Peterborough know a fair bit about this already. And that is why these numbers that have come out today are such a shock. Yes, of course, the number 10 spinners were briefing it could be as high as 1 million, so that when it comes in at just over 600,000, we're supposed to say it's not too bad, is it? Remind ourselves that from Windrush at the end of the 40s to the end of a century, net migration was normally about 30,000 a year. It span out of control under Tony Blair and Labour. But then we had David Cameron in 2010 promising us net migration of tens of thousands a year. He promised the same in 2015. Theresa May said she'd cut the numbers in 2017. And Boris Johnson in 2019 talked about an Australian-style point system, which we all took to mean it'd be very tough to get in. You'd have to bring your own health insurance with you. And the whole idea was to control immigration. Well, with these numbers today, since the Conservatives took power, net migration into Britain is over 3.5 million. 3.5 million. Our population has risen by 8 million since 2001, and 85% of that is directly down to immigration. Nobody on GB News or anywhere else is not saying that vast numbers of people that have come have been great people and actually wanted to work, unlike the 4 million British people who are being paid unemployment benefit and don't seem to want to work. But we cannot sustain a population rising as rapidly as this. It simply doesn't work. I don't even believe there's now an economic benefit to this either. So I think what we're seeing, frankly, from the Tories and from Labour, is a great immigration lie. They tell us at elections what they want us to hear, but they never actually really mean it. Now, talking of making your own luck, there's one member of Parliament who's become rather well known in the last 24 hours. This is what happened in the House of Commons just after midday yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, if anyone wants to see what uncontrolled immigration looks like, all they've got to do is wake up tomorrow morning, listen to the headlines and see what this government...
Order. Mr. Bristow, I think you're going to be leaving. I'm asking you to leave now, because otherwise I'll name you. I'm not having it, and I've warned you before. It's the same people. And the same will happen on this side. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the reason they're issuing so many visas is Labour and...
Well, the MP that was booted out of the chamber of the House of Commons yesterday was the Member of Parliament for Peterborough, Paul Bristow, and he joins me now.
are you the sort of back-of-the-class lout in Parliament? Is that what it is?
Why is it always me?
Well, there may be a reason for this. I don't know.
No, look, to be honest, I do sledge a bit. I'm not going to lie. I do sledge a bit. But I don't think I'm the biggest offender in the House. But unfortunately, I think I caught his eye. And look, when the Speaker tells you to leave, it's the right thing to do. You better leave. But as you can imagine, my phone went a bit wild. And I am a bit embarrassed about it. I have apologised to him. But what I actually said was when he said, let me tell you about uncontrolled immigration, I'll tell you what it looks like, I yelled, vote Labour. So that's
right.
what I was booted out for.
So what you meant then, Paul Bristow, was the numbers would be even higher under Labour?
Well, they've got an open borders policy.
Well, you have too.
Well, we're trying to... You know, numbers are far too high, there's no doubt about it.
Don't you tell me numbers are far too high. You know, I see government ministers, Rishi Sunak, saying the pressure on public services is unsustainable. Yeah. I've been telling them that for 20 years.
Well, I don't disagree with you. And I think Peterborough is a city. Immigration has benefited Peterborough in many ways. But it also puts a huge amount of pressure on public services, on local housing needs.
Yes.
So, look, I completely agree with you. And I think today, hopefully, it's a shock that a lot of us need. If we break down some of those figures, at least 170 or so thousand of them are people from Ukraine or from Hong Kong, people we've given visas to. I don't think anyone's seriously suggesting that we shouldn't have supported those people. And isn't it something, by the way, the very people who sit there and say this country is intolerant, it's racist, all this sort of nonsense, we're giving such a fantastic support to those people fleeing conflict.
We've allowed 500,000 people in as genuine refugees since the referendum. So the idea that we're somehow mean-spirited is for the birds.
I agree with you.
But you see, the point I'm making, Paul Bristow, and this is what matters, when Cameron promised tens of thousands a year, he was told by those around him, as EU members, it's not achievable, Mr Cameron. Oh, well, never mind. We'll just go on saying it. And when Boris Johnson promised to control immigration, we now know, from what was said inside Number 10, he never believed in it. He was just telling the electorate what he wants, what he thought they wanted to hear. And here's my problem. This is dishonesty. This is lying to the British public and hoping they agree with you that Labour would be worse.
Let me say, there are many in the Conservative Party, many in Parliament, who do agree that immigration is too high and do want to break down those numbers. So let's just look at those figures that we've talked about today. 174,000 of them are from Hong Kong, are from Ukraine.
You've said that already.
But then you've got over about 200,000 who are students and their dependents. Now, the number of dependents...
Whoa. Why should any university student bring a dependent in?
I completely agree with you. I mean, if I'm going to go and do my masters...
But your government's done this.
If you're going to go and do your masters, you don't need to bring your mother with you. I completely agree with you.
So why has your government done this?
Well, today, what we've announced today is a crackdown on that. We're going to bring that number... That number used to be, I think, about 11,000 or 16,000, I think, and it's actually increased to about 174,000 in just about 3 years. Now, that's far too many, and I think that backdoor route to immigration, that has been closed, because we're going to ban the dependents...
Do you know what? I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
We've got to give it a go,
because
right?
I keep hearing this. You know, I heard Priti Patel on the illegal immigration. I saw Boris Johnson at Lid Airport talking about Rwanda. 140 million quid spent. Not a single person been sent to Rwanda yet. I don't believe, Paul, we're going to deal with this. Certainly with the illegal stuff, all the while we're members of ECHR. And on the legal stuff, you know, we were told we'd move to a high-skilled migration level. That would mean people coming in who earn a lot of money. Actually, you can come into Britain for way below the average salary. The doors are literally open.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that. I don't disagree with the idea that we need to transform places like Peterborough away from a low-wage, low-skill economy into a high-wage, high-skill economy. I tell you what cheap labour is, Nigel. Cheap labour, basically, we've been addicted to it for the past sort of 20 years. And the UK economy, it grows a little bit like this with cheap labour, but it has all those consequences as a result of it. What we actually need to do is to bring those economically inactive people that you've talked about, focus on retraining, reskilling, and guess what? Tinkering with the universal credit system. So we can encourage these people back into work.
We've got to stop penalising people on benefit for going back into work.
Absolutely right.
We also, I think, have to make some people who appear to be rather reluctant to work, you know, maybe a bit of a carrot and stick approach. Paul, if I'm a voter in Peterborough, I'm a Brexiteer, we're in Brexit territory.
We are.
And I'm disgusted. I feel the Tory government has failed me on Brexit. It's not cut regulation. It's not cut migration. I feel let down like a cheap pair of braces. Why should I vote for you and not Labour in Peterborough next
Well, let's
time
see
round?
where we are by the next general election. Let me give you 3 good reasons why I think I should be returned as the Member of Parliament for Peterborough. Because I think what this is all about is trying to turn Peterborough into a high-wage, high-skill economy. We've not had the level of investment, transport infrastructure investment in the city over the past 20 years that we deserve. Since I've been elected in 2019, we've had well over 100 million worth of investment. That goes to our university, which is going to be the means to create that high-skill, high-wage economy.
And a new railway bridge.
That's regenerating our city centre. We've got £23 million to do that. And we've got £48 million to build a new station quarter. And everyone says to me, well, why are we spending £48 million on a new station? Well, we're not. We're actually building a brand new station quarter, which will be the gateway to our city, not just the gateway to the east of England, in fact, because Peterborough's the busiest station.
Do you believe you can hold this seat?
Yeah, I'm going to hold the seat.
Final thought. The Conservatives did much better in the local elections in Peterborough
We did.
than we did around the country.
We did.
Why is that?
Because I think the Conservatives and the City Council, and I think myself, have got a strong track record. I'm a high-profile, active local member of
Well,
Parliament.
you're very high profile now.
Well, for the wrong reasons. For the wrong reasons.
Sorry.
Look, end of the day, Peterborough is my city. It's where I grew up. Okay? It's where I went to school. It's where I live. I care about this city. First and foremost, I came into politics. I want to be the MP for where I live. So I think that's recognised. I think I'm a high-profile MP. And look, this is the best job I'm ever going to have. And if it lasts another 2 years or it lasts another 22 years, that's fine. You know, the electorate are rarely wrong. But so I go into this election in 18 months' time or whenever it is with that attitude. If I don't win, I'll be fine. It doesn't matter. But what I will do is I'll give my very best to the city that I grew up in, the city that I'm from, and I'll continue to do that.
Paul Bristow, I'm certain of one thing, you'll continue to stay on the news. You seem to be very good at that. And thank you for joining us here on GB News this evening.
In a moment, I'll be joined by Alt Mehmet, the chairman of Migration Watch, and we will really drill down into these figures and what's happened
To our population over the course of the last 20 years. Don't go away, back with you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, I'm joined now by Al Mehmet, chairman of Migration Watch.
And Migration Watch have been around for a couple of decades. And Al, you've always been concerned as to government policy on immigration, both legal and illegal, into Britain. These figures today, over 600,000. Someone told me that had we counted the numbers the same as last year, they would have been at about 750,000. Is that right?
That is absolutely right.
So are they conning us?
You know that the government is very clever when they dress these figures up to make them sound better than they actually are. It's not a case of conning. The fact is that were we to be calculating on the basis that we did last time round, it would have been 749,000.
Right.
So, yeah, to that extent, it's not that we're being conned, but we're not being
they've
told
changed
the
the way
story.
they count the numbers.
They have indeed.
Yeah. Have you heard that, folks, from the other broadcasters today? No, funny that. What's your reaction to these numbers?
I'm shocked. I really am. And notwithstanding the fact that we were given to believe that they would be even higher, and I sensed that there was a little bit of jiggery-pokery going on there. They wanted that 800,000, 1 million number being discussed, so that when we heard 600,000, or as I thought it was going to be, just over 700,000, then everything would have been OK. Wonderful. The figures have come down. Well, they haven't. This is absolutely devastating, frankly. These record figures have very long-term implications if they continue. And even if we didn't count Ukraine and Hong Kong, we would still be talking about 440,000 net. That's extraordinary. Not only is this figure high, but when you look at what the population increase was over 20 years that you referred to earlier, that happened at an average annual net migration of 245,000. I'll leave it to you to work out what 600,000 means.
So if we go on
higher.
like this, we're heading for 70 million population, 75 million population, and massive pressure on public services, roads and everything else.
Sure, yeah. Well, everything, every single thing. It's going to have pressure, be it your GP surgery, be it the kids going to school, be it the NHS, the number of midwives that we need, the number of surgeons that we need. Everything is going to be under pressure.
Now, interesting, I talked to Paul Bristow, the MP, a moment ago, and he talked about Labour and what Labour might be like, as if, look at the other bloke, he's even worse, But, interestingly, opinion poll this week showing the public marginally now trust the Labour Party more on this issue than they trust the Conservative Party. There's a few rubbishes here. I think actually, and I'm going to ask out this, I think, sir, you're right. We don't trust any of them anymore, do we?
That's what I was going to say. I haven't trusted any of them for a long time, because when you have all the experts saying, actually, high immigration is a good thing, when you hear the Office for National Statistics give us a figure, and then the OBR says, no, it's actually a good thing because it grows the economy. Yes, it grows the economy, but it also grows the population. So the slice of the cake that you get actually doesn't change at all. Meanwhile, you've got all the pressures on the services that you've touched on.
But it's OK now. It's fine out. It's all solved. Paul Bristow just told me there's no problem. Rishi's going to stop the boats. They're going to end excessive dependence coming in for, with students, and they're going to significantly cut the numbers. So it's all going to be OK.
If only. If only.
Do you mean you don't believe them?
No, it's not a case of I don't believe them. I just wonder whether they know what they're talking about. Look, I worked in Nigeria for 4 years. Great country, great fun there. But I know the sort of pressures there are for young people in particular to make their way into the West, into the prosperous West, have a better life, have an education and have a job. Nigeria, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, it's the same. There's huge amounts of poverty and there's a lack of opportunity. So, of course, they're going to want to come here. And unless we control it, I'm afraid more and more will come.
Well, my worry on this is, of course, that nearly everybody that comes across from Calais, Boulogne on those dinghies, nearly all of them have come across the Mediterranean to begin with. And the numbers that have crossed the Med in the last year are 3 times the number that we had the previous year. What can we do with France to stop illegal immigration?
What can we do with France?
Apart from giving it hundreds of millions of pounds.
Well, I think that perhaps that we could behave a little bit more like the French do when they start reacting to things that they don't like. And this is the thing. None of the people here in this audience were asked, actually, do you want this level of migration? We're not talking about people coming to this country, contributing. I'm a first-generation migrant. There's always been migration. You touched on it. Since the war, there's been steady, sensible migration levels.
Yeah.
It's the speed and the scale that people are worried about.
And I think it's also the breach of promise. That if you're told an election after election we're going to control this and you don't, I agree, why should we trust anybody?
4 elections.
Now, I'm going to get some comments and questions from the audience. The lady there seems to have quite a bit to say on this subject. So we're going to try and get a microphone to her. There we... No, come on.
Okay.
No, I want it on immigration, so you can try later. Right, other people, the gentleman there. Now, you were the one that shouted out, I don't trust any of them. Your name, please.
Matt.
Matt.
Yep. Do you think that mass immigration forced into towns and cities around the UK is carried out to take the vote away from the centre-right?
Well, that's an interesting one. Some would say deeply conspiratorial. However, both in this country and in America, with the Democrats, there is evidence that a lot of people who come first generation, second generation and naturalise, there is evidence that a lot of them do vote Labour or do vote for, the Democrats in the case of the USA. To say that it's deliberate might be pushing it a bit, but it's a reality. And funny, isn't it?
Stopping it, so it's as good as deliberate.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because one of the things that Labour are teasing is that all foreign nationals should get the vote. Al, what's your thought?
If we're looking back to 20 years, Tony Blair, actually there's lots of evidence that at that time there was an encouragement of people to come to this country because ultimately they were not only sort of doing the lowly jobs, but in the end they would also vote Labour. And that, I'm afraid, was something that is recorded. Whether it's going on now, I don't think that the Tories are encouraging it, and yet the system that they've put in place effectively does it.
Is going to do that. No, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Other people that put some hands up, those of you that have got some thoughts, some ideas, some questions, come on, you can't all be scared. Gentleman there with his hand up. Hello.
I'm Mike. My thoughts are that there's a huge need for workers in this country, and there are a lot of people have come over looking for work. Would it not be a good idea to let them work, even with an electronic tag? This area of Peterborough, there's a great need for agricultural workers, builders workers, and engineering, which has historically always been the same. But there are people here who want to work, come to work. Could we not let them work and control it with electronic tags?
3 points on that, Mike. I'm going to make very quickly before out comes in. Number one, we've got too many British people who aren't working who are stuck in a benefits trap whereby going back to work, you know, if they go back to work, they risk being worse off a year down the road. Second point to make is that if you allow lots of people in on relatively low-paid jobs, the minimum wage becomes the maximum wage for everybody else. And we have seen those wage compressions in the building industry and elsewhere. Third quick point, if I may. If you allow people who've come illegally to work, double the number will come next year illegally. Parts of America have given these amnesties to people who've come illegally, and it's led to millions more coming. Alp, your thoughts?
Yes, I echo that. No, no, no. It would be the most foolish thing, frankly, to do, to encourage people to come here, because in the end, you get here and you can work and you will earn a bit of money, and you will certainly be earning a great deal more money than you are earning at home.
Yeah.
It will just drive a coach and horses through whatever semblance of control we still have.
I know. Great question. Thank you. I've got time for one or two more. Gentleman here with his hand up. Lady there with her hand up. Lady there first, please.
Thank you.
Hello.
My name is Mrs. Herneman, and I just want to ask you, is it a good idea to come out from the ECHR, and how soon we should do it? Is that
well, I don't think... I want to be cautious about this. I don't think we should leave too quickly. I think tomorrow afternoon, something like that, might work.
We need to do something. Action, not just words. Action.
What worries me is Alex Chalk, who's just come into the cabinet in a senior judicial position, said very clearly 2 days ago, we will not be leaving the ECHR. I know, I'm afraid, no. Well, because I'm afraid, look, the Conservative Party never believed in Brexit. One of the reasons they failed so badly, I think, on this and on many other things, they never believed in it. And they think we'll be seen as the bad guys if we leave ECHR. I believe that I mean, if you deport people, it's a disincentive. Alp, ECHR was a real problem last year with Rwanda, wasn't it?
ECHR is a huge problem, and I think we should leave, OK? That is my humble opinion. However, what I think is also true, I personally don't believe that leaving the ECHR on its own will actually lead to the stops, to the boats stopping.
Not on its own, no, but it would help enormously with deportation.
It's just, it's out of date. It's inappropriate. It's not what we need now. It's the same with the 1951 Convention. They just totally outmoded, not fit for purpose. We need to move on and look at another way of doing it.
Alp, to finish, your latest campaign and petition, tell us all about it.
Yes, the People's Petition, frankly, for so many years, people have been told that something's going to happen, and it hasn't. A lot of people up and down the country feel betrayed. Well, I've decided, my little organisation has decided, that we will have a petition for people.
Right, well, the website's on the screen. For those that are watching, the website's on the screen. Alp, you've just advertised the People's Petition on the People's Channel. Thank you for coming to Peterborough this evening. Thank you very much indeed. Great stuff. In a moment, we'll talk about the private rental sector in Peterborough and what has happened to rent and what may happen in the future. Back with you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
So, between the 2011 census and the 2021 census, the population of Peterborough grew by over 17%. The population here is exploding. But that leads to a slight problem. Where is everybody going to live? And what is it going to cost them? And what's the government doing about it? And, hey, with these net migration figures, those pressures may just get worse. Mark Homer is co-founder and director of Progressive Property, and you are the largest private residential company letting properties in the Peterborough area. So, with that population explosion, what has happened to rents in Peterborough in the last few years?
OK, so 2016, if I went on to Rightmove and I just had a look at our sort of bread and butter stock, which would be little 3-beds, ex-council, sort of Bretton, Ortons, those kinds of areas, you'd be looking at a rent of maybe $550 a month. And there would be about 25 of those available. Fast forward, this morning I had a look, there were 5, and you're looking at about £1,000 a month. Just under £1,000 a month.
So rents have virtually doubled.
Almost doubled since 16.
Since the referendum, actually, in 2016. How much of this is population pressure?
Well, I think there's a few things. I think the first thing is clearly population. This is, in the last 10 years, this has been the fastest growing city by population in the whole country. But I think a huge thing is Section 24. So lots and lots of landlords are exiting the sector because they're getting taxed on their turnover. They're effectively not able to offset their mortgage interest against their rent. So it's a bit like getting your payslip, having a look at, you know, the top of it with not very much income at all, having your sort of tax taken off, and at the bottom, you actually owe the government money, which is a bizarre situation.
So people are literally people that own rental properties on mortgages, selling them, getting out of the market. So the supply of rental properties is contracting. At the same time, there are more and more people coming into the country who need to rent.
It's plummeting.
Plummeting?
If we put a property on the market now, one of those houses, little 3-bed houses, on average, if we leave it there for 10 days, we will get north of 150 inquiries, and we might get around half of those that convert into an application. So we often put them on for 2 days. We end up with, I don't know, net 20 applications, something like that. So there is a severe shortage. It's that It's all of the extra red tape, it's the regulations.
Does the government understand what they're doing here?
Do you know, this is what I keep wondering. This was George Osborne, 2015. Apparently it was someone in the Treasury who dreamt this sort of Section 24 up, not being able to offset all the mortgage interest. But then they've added layers and layers of extra regulation. You know, we have right to rent checks now, which is basically they make us border force. So we have to decide whether somebody has the right to rent a property in this country. You know, there's a whole load of other legislation around sort of, I don't know, licensing, $750 to $1,000 every 5 years that you have to spend. And then there's all the sort of extra safety requirements, Legionella, and then there's EPCs.
Which, of course, is the net zero commitment, which with older properties is very, very expensive to get them to be compliant.
It's going to be thousands. It's going to be... Yeah.
But what about, you know, folk who come to Peterborough, they're working, they're paying their tax, they're now spending more and more of their income just on somewhere to live?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, this is a huge sort of... it's a landing area for you know, migrants, and there's loads and loads of picking fields around, there's loads of sort of warehouses, so it attracts people because it's the cheapest place within 75 miles of London. So local people are sort of, in many ways, they're competing with this huge...
What can be done, Mark? I mean, clearly, you know, you're not responsible for government immigration policy and the rocketing population. I won't pin that on you. But what do you think can be done to increase the supply of available housing to let? Well,
I think the first thing is, obviously, we talk about them building more houses. They've got to do something about the planning system and not just sort of talk about it. So some sort of US system where you have a zone and you sort of say, in that zone, you can build houses, and as long as you meet this criteria, a little bit like building regs, you're pretty much sure that you're going to get planning consent. I think that's the first thing. I think the next thing is this regulation. They need to row some of this lot back and actually create incentive. You know, Thatcher did this with the Housing Act. You know, she came along in the 80s and she, as much as lots of people don't, you know, like it when a tenant doesn't pay, she gave landlords the ability to evict, to, you know, obviously keep rents in line with the market, and she created incentive, and that sector boomed. There were so many, when we came into this 20 years ago, there were so many more landlords coming in, and it suppresses rents, and it creates choice, better quality properties, you know, it's just supply and demand. It's basic economics, but somebody doesn't seem to get that, or they don't want to get it. Maybe it's votes.
Maybe you're right.
Maybe it's votes.
Mark Homer, thank you for giving us your expertise. I have to say, those rental increases here in Peterborough are shocking, but it is, as Mark says, a demand-supply equation. Supply reducing because the government are making it difficult for people to let out properties, red tape, taxes. And supplies increasing, well, just have a look at today's net migration statistics. It doesn't take much working out. In a moment, I'll be joined by Liam Halligan, GB News' economics editor. I'm going to ask him, we hear every year mass migration is good for the economy, but is it really?
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Well, economics, it matters hugely. I'm joined by GB News' business and economics editor, Liam Halligan. Liam, you do numbers and sums and things like that. So let's have a quick look at the numbers and the sums. And the question I really want you to answer is, whenever I, in my political career, talk for 20 years about these excess numbers and my concerns about what it might do to society, I was always told, but it's a huge economic benefit. So let's have a look at the numbers and examine that question.
I think over many years, immigration has been an economic benefit to the UK, but it's a question of the pace, and it's a question of whether the public services and the housing can keep up with the pace. Otherwise, a lot of the original population can really suffer. But you've been talking about these immigration numbers throughout the show. So let's just have a look at them. I've got some graphics here that folks at home can look at. The total immigration number, Nigel, during 2022 was 1.2 million. That's the population of Birmingham. The net immigration number that we've been talking about is that number minus people going to Australia, Canada, if they're youngsters, retiring to Spain, and that's where you get the 606,000 number. Of the gross 1.2 million coming in, 925,000 were from outside the EU. So even though Peterborough has had an awful lot of EU migration from Poland, Lithuania, Romania, that's actually much lower now. That's 88,000 EU nationals. And Alf Mehmet from Migration Watch was talking about the different strands of immigration. I've got those on a graphic as well. Of non-EU immigrants, 179,000 were on work visas, including dependents. Special visas, Hong Kong, Ukraine, that was 172,000. Asylum seekers, that was 73,000. And here's the really big one, students and dependents, 208,000 students with their dependents, a huge number. And then family dependents, reunions, joining family members, another 28,000. So the really big numbers that stand out there are the Hong Kong, Ukraine, 172,000, and students and dependents, over 200,000 in a single year.
Yeah, but also the year before was 500,000.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're running at numbers historically 10 times per annum.
Well, the first year of Tony Blair in 97 was 50,000, right? And as you said, from the Second World War until that time, it was roughly 30 or 40,000, including my family, who came from the west of Ireland.
Yeah, although I think the Irish-British connection was slightly different.
That's right.
Slightly different. Liam, as I say, you know, I've done 1 or 2 interviews today, and we're all supposed to bow down to the god of GDP. As long as GDP goes up, it doesn't really matter if everybody suffers. But I'm beginning to question now, with the number of dependents that are coming, and crucially, what has happened to productivity? We've been hooked on this model of importing large-scale unskilled labour. Our productivity has gone down, not up. Is this, what we're looking at today, is this actually good for us economically?
I think this is part of the problem. Look, GDP is the total sum of transactions in the economy, gross domestic product. GDP goes up when there are more people.
Yes.
But what really matters to to people in this room and across the country is GDP per head, as Alf Mehmet was saying. And if the number of people here are expanding faster proportionally than GDP, then living standards fall. And you mentioned productivity. That's like the efficiency of the economy.
Yeah.
And the way to increase productivity is to invest in technology and or to invest in skills. And clearly, there are those in the commanding heights of industry, many of whom donate heavily to both political parties, it must be said. They just want endless rounds of cheaper labour coming in, rather than training people, doing the hard thing of training people who are already here, wherever they came from. And that is a major, major problem, I think. And that is the reason why it is legitimate, I think, as an economist, to question whether this extra immigration that we've had, given the pace of it, given the impact on people who are already here, is actually good for the economy.
But maybe some good news. Maybe some good news. Come on, let's cheer everybody up and tell them their energy bills are about to go down significantly.
Well, you've been told all day that your energy bills are going to come down by 400 quid. And economists, we are the dismal scientists, but I'd rather be dismal than wrong. So I've got another graphic here. So the energy price cap, there's the average household's energy bill, announced by Ofgem this morning. It will come in July. Here's another graphic. That average cap's cut from £3,280 a year energy, combined electricity and gas, to 2,074. But that doesn't mean it's going to come down from 3,200 to 2,074. It's going to come down from 2,500, because that's where it's been the average, because there's been this energy price guarantee in the aftermath of this war in Ukraine. So if you do the sums of that, that's a reduction of £426 per year, or 17% for the average household. It's not an overall cap. If you use more, you'll pay more. If you use less, but the average unit cost is set by Ofgem. Having said that, that £400 reduction, Nigel, by July the 1st, is almost completely offset, because the government in the March budget removed the £400 it was giving to our 32 million households in a subsidy for energy. It was paid through your energy company monthly. That's been completely removed. So the energy bills are coming down by 400 quid, but the subsidy of 400 quid's being removed. So they're roughly going to stay the same. I'm sorry to break the news, but that's what the maths shows.
So hoping to try and end this programme on a happy and positive note, but it's all smoke and mirrors. Final thought, final subject to talk about. We got the inflation figures this week. They were once again worse than people thought. Two quick thoughts on it. Number one, do you think inflation's here to stay? Because, you know, the governor of the Bank of England told us it would all just disappear.
Transitory, old boy.
Yeah, I mean, what an idiot. But and number two, you know, these folk are all doing food shopping. It's really hitting people. Where do you see the future for this?
So headline inflation came down from 10.8% in March to 8.7%, a much lower reduction than people thought. But food price inflation, astonishingly, was still at 19%. Which is crazy, because wholesale food prices, as many farmers around here will tell you, wholesale food prices have been falling across the world for the last year, actually falling. So I do think the government was right to get the food retailers into the Treasury and have a frank exchange of views.
Are we being ripped off, Liam Halligan?
Well, the Treasury did invite the Competition and Markets Authority into that meeting to look whether or not there were sharp practices going on, opportunistic pricing. Again, a lot of farmers, I live in the east of England, I live just down the road, tell me that they feel they're getting a raw deal. It certainly seems to me there has been a lot of unnecessary price rises in recent months, with some people in the supply chain exerting their power and increasing and keeping inflation higher than it needs to be. But look, this is the worst inflation situation for 40 years. And that's why there's this cost of living crisis, which is completely dominating politics. We're not out of the woods yet.
Rishi said inflation would be 2.9% by Christmas. Is he right?
I think I don't think it'll be 2.9% by Christmas. I do think it'll be around 5 or 6%, so he can say inflation's halved. But I can't see food price inflation coming down anytime soon.
Well, Liam, thanks for joining us and cheering everybody up so much. It's just absolutely marvellous. Well done. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we like to... we're going to end the programme again with a satirical ditty. Yes, absolutely. They're back. It's Bell and Sperling. Take it away, guys.
Harry and Meghan have been caught up in a low-speed chase. They're looking for a new driver that likes to race. We know a woman that can, so we're the bravo man. She said she'll take the job if she can drive at a pace.
Holly and Phil are finally through. It hasn't been the same since they jumped the queue. Phil's time is over, he's had to leave the sofa. He's been crying down the phone to Gordon the Gopher. Hey, 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 Nigel says just how it is. Phil lost his job, and Nigel says just as it is. So Schofield, shut your gob, 'cause Nigel's always on the ball. Nigel said
It wasn't like a car chase in a movie.
Nigel said
Is that he can't survive without the British taxpayer.
Nigel said
What the hell's going on?
He's Nigel Farage.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Tomorrow, the day after, and the day after that will be dry and fine with sunny spells for most. Pleasantly warm by day, but chilly at night. High pressure is very slowly creeping in. These weather fronts are going to change things a little bit across northern Scotland over the next couple of days. But for the vast majority, under the influence of high pressure, it stays dry and fine. There's some patches of cloud around at the moment. They'll tend to break up a little overnight. Might turn a little misty. One or two fog patches are possible through the early hours. And there's the cloud I talked about earlier, increasing across the northwest of Scotland. Through more northern parts of the mainland of Scotland, we could get down close to freezing, generally down to single figures, maybe 10 or 11 where we keep it a bit more cloud. Some will start a bit grey then on Friday, but for most it will be another fine day with bright sunny spells. Cloud increasing all the while in the Western Isles of Scotland. Bit of drizzle here, and by lunchtime we could see a few spots arriving over the Highlands. But for much of Scotland, and certainly England, Wales, Northern Ireland, dry and fine with sunny spells. Quite warm as well, temperatures getting into the high teens, low 20s more widely. Always a bit cooler on some coasts with a bit of a breeze blowing. And cooler with that thicker cloud across the far north of Scotland, still providing the odd spot of rain over the Northern Isles during Friday evening. But for most, a fine Friday evening and looking like a fine and dry Saturday. Again, northern Scotland seeing more cloud, and there will be a little bit of rain trickling in here as a weather front moves in. But for most places, sunny spells on Saturday, and again feeling pleasant in the sunny spells after a bit of a cool start. By the afternoon, we'll be up into the low 20s more widely. Again, some of the beaches will be a little cooler, and it will be cooler in northern Scotland because this line of patchy rain is a weather front. That will introduce things turning cooler for more of us during the second half of the weekend, but still, for most of us, staying dry with sunny spells.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion,